Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Coffee Break, where we'll spend some time discussing different opportunities to leverage Altair's data analytics solutions. My name is LaRue Brown. I'm Senior Director for Data Solutions here at Altair, and today I want to focus on how we can cleanse, normalize, and aggregate data. So the first three sessions of this series, we talked about data extraction, how we can pull data from multiple disparate data sources and get them into a tabular format. But even after we've done that, sometimes there's additional cleansing that has to take place, and then we have to normalize that data to migrate it to a target system, or we may need it for follow-on reporting, visualizations, or what have you. Sometimes we have to store data into a database. Before we do, we may need to transform the data in such a way that it matches the schema of said database or said target system. So today I want to spend a little time talking you through how we can actually leverage Altair's RapidMiner platform to do that. And just as a reminder for our platform, this is a full end-to-end platform that's designed for all personas, whether you're a data scientist, a business analyst, an executive, or anywhere in between. It gives you the flexibility to easily build out repeatable workflows that will scale and grow with you. It gives you the ability to work collaboratively across teams, across different skill sets, and again, those different personas that I mentioned. And in particular for today, we're going to talk about a component of the RapidMiner platform that's called Monarch. This component is more so meant for data extraction, like we saw in the first couple of series, but it's also really good as a data cleansing and data normalization solution. So if you need to do any ETL type work, Monarch also gives you the flexibility to do that transformation of data, and we have native connectors to load data into multiple systems post-transformation. Hey, so let's take a quick look at what the actual workflow would look like in terms of leveraging Monarch, which is a component of the RapidMiner platform, for doing some data normalization, cleansing, and transformation. Okay, so I'm going to first hop over to Monarch. This should look fairly familiar for those who did attend the first couple of sessions. Um, the first few times we talked about kind of loading actual data into the platform, how we can leverage the open data, pull in data from any number of sources, whether it be PDF or text files, spreadsheets, databases, applications, big data sources, or even from the web. We've already gone through that process. So today we're going to actually start off with a workflow where we've already extracted data from these 12 different expense reports. And I have the data available for me in the tabular view here in our prepare window. But even though I've extracted this information, you'll notice a few things about this. First off, this data is not cleansed and not fully normalized. If I turn on the white space indicator, you'll see in some cases I have consecutive spaces. In some cases I'll have line breaks as well and some other things that I may want to actually just clean up a little bit. But what you'll also notice is I have this combined field, which again, in most cases is not necessarily a problem, but especially that use case where I talk about we're going to migrate this to a database. I I potentially have each of these components in their own separate field. So I have the address in one component, the city in one, the state in one, and the zip in another. Things like that. Similar with the employee. I may want to get the employee ID separate from the employee name. Moreover, I may want to put the employee's first and last name in separate columns. So you can kind of see sort of those different cleansing operations that will need to take place. Let's talk about how we can actually do that leveraging Monarch. So with any one of these columns we want to perform a cleansing operation on, we simply right click on the column and it brings up a contextual menu that allows you to do a lot of different operations. Again, there are quite a few here, so we're not going to go through every single one, but let's talk about some of the common ones that we might actually encounter. One of them is actually splitting data into parts. So some common splits that you might see is splitting into parts from the left to right. Imagine you have a comma separated list or a comma separated data set. You want to everywhere there's a comma, you want to split into a new field. Again, making that process seamlessly easy without having to write any code. But we take it a step further. We actually give you ways to break names and addresses into parts as well. So we have underlying algorithms that can understand and recognize an address, and it can break it into parts for you. Let's go ahead and use this one. I'm select the split address into parts. What I do is going to open up a submenu that's going to ask me which component of the address I actually want to keep. So in my case, I can see I have sort of the company name followed by the physical street address, then city, state, and zip. So that's what I'm going to select. I'm going to have address line 1, 2, city, region, and postal code. Note if you do have some where there's potentially multiple lines, you can select the additional address lines. It will recognize those for you. And if you want to just be sure about the parsing of the address, you can select this error code checker. And what this will do is it'll tell you if it's not able to successfully parse the address, it'll give you indication so you can just kind of check it and verify or validate what's causing the issue. But for those that do parse correctly, it'll give you a clear indication there as well, so you can have those automatically processed along to the next steps. And I'm going to go ahead and just remove the original column. I don't need this combined column now since I'm going to split this into multiple parts. When I select OK, you'll notice it's going to perform all of those changes for me automatically, where I'll get the address components broken down to the appropriate fields. Okay, so as I come over now, I'll continue over to the employee. Let's do a similar thing here. This one, you notice there's kind of two different challenges we want to take a look at. First off, I want to actually extract the employee information. I'm sorry, the employee ID from the right-hand side, and then keep the employee name separately on the left-hand side. So let's go ahead and do that first. Again, I'm going to right-click. Again, I'm going to use split, but this time I am going to split into parts from the left. Notice what we want to actually split on is going to be that opening parentheses. That's going to be the indication, that's where the employee ID starts. So if I just select the opening parentheses in my delimiter, I can generate a new column from that. This time we are not going to remove the original column because I do want to retain the information that is here. Okay, so now that I have that, I want to clean up this particular column first. I removed the opening parentheses on the left, but that closing parentheses is still there. So in order to remove that, I'm now going to use a different operator where we have this called clean. And this one allows you to do a few different things. So if you have consecutive spaces or leading and trailing spaces, you can remove those. Alphanumeric characters or things like that. Or I can actually just specify a specific character I want to remove. I'm going to select that one. And what I would like to remove is just that closing parentheses. Okay, so this employee ID actually looks the way that I wanted to. I'm going to just rename the column now so it's more clear for what it actually is. I wanted to go ahead and do the same here. Split. Now I have the last name and first name again into two separate fields. So I want to go ahead and split this so I have those separated out as well. But before I do, I want to get rid of those consecutive spaces that we do have here. So again, I'm going to right click. I want to come over to clean. This time I'm going to remove the consecutive spaces or perform a collapse. And now I can split this column again into parts from the left. And this time I'll use the comma and the space as my actual delimiter. This time I can also remove the originals because I don't need this individual column anymore. And with that, I'll have now the employee's first and last name separated out. I'm going to just rename the columns again so they match what the actual data is in those individual columns. Okay, and notice I did retain the original column. Totally up to you if you do or do not want to do that. But one of the other great things I just want to point out here is that you'll notice that each of the changes that I've applied thus far are stored in our change history. So now that I'm looking at this, I have the employee's first name, last name, and employee ID in three separate fields. I really don't need this combined field anymore. Notice when I did the split of it down here, change number 7, I didn't check that box to retain the, I did not check the box to remove the original column. But I can always go back and just edit that change. And if I want to remove that, I can actually just select the checkbox. And notice those changes will propagate up automatically for me. So even though I've applied a series of changes after the fact, those changes I can go back and edit at any given time and they'll propagate up for me. This change history is also really good as a sort of an audit log, so you can see specifically what steps were applied to the data source from how you went from the original starting point to the final result that you have. Okay, one final change we'll do here is just on a working with the date field. So just looking at this, you'll say, well, this already is a date field. But if I look at the data type symbol in the top left of the column, I can actually see that this is listed as text right now. Why does this matter? If I want to split this into parts or group by date or by quarter or year, things like that, right now, since it is a text field, I can't do that. This field is equivalent to this one in terms of parsing the information. If I wanted to be able to break it down by month, by day, by year, by quarter, etc., I need to first convert this to a date field. So I can do that again a couple of ways. I can right click like we've been doing before and go to the convert option and do that. But I want to show you a different way which you can actually modify the data type of a column. Where you are seeing that actual icon to the left of the column name, if you select that, it'll bring up a drop down for you that allows you to convert fields either to numeric, text, or to date time. I'm going to go and convert to that date time field. Now, if you recall, my field did not have an actual time associated with it, so it just defaults to the actual time. I'm sorry, defaults to midnight. This is sort of standard behavior that you'll see. If there is a time there, it will actually import the time that you're using and bring that in. But if there's not a time, it will just use the standard of 12 a.m. However, in that case, since we don't have a time, this 12 a.m. is not useful for us. So the last thing I want to do here is probably just format this column. And there's, again, different options for how you can actually format. In our case, I want to just do a short date, which we have there as our option, and select, and that'll just basically hide the time for us. Now remember, since this is a date time field, the time is still actually there. So if I choose to split on time or use the time later on down the road, it's still actually there since the field is an actual date time field. It's just from a visualization formatting perspective, we'll have it displayed this way. So in terms of cleansing the data set, that's really kind of the process you would want to take. Just right click on the specific column of interest that you want to perform the operation on. And then you can begin again continue to do that throughout each individual attribute. These are applied for us according to our change history. So as I bring in new reports or new documents, I don't have to redo the work that I'm creating now. I can actually just build it once, reuse it as often as I like, which is again one of the other key benefits of the solution. And then one of the last things we want to take a look at here is on aggregation. So we looked at just cleansing a data set, normalizing it, but sometimes I also do different types of aggregations. In this particular case, I have our different departments, and I can see the total expenses that were applied for the individual transactions throughout this report. But maybe I wanted to look and see total expenses by department by calendar year. So how do I go about doing just a summary or a transformation for that? Well, we'll do that by selecting the transform icon at the top. A lot of different transformations that you can perform, removing duplicates, doing a transpose, generating pivot tables, things like that. But in our case, I want to do just a basic summary or an aggregation. So I'm going to select this group operation. It's going to ask me what items do I actually want to group. So remember, in my case, I want to group by department. And I also want to group, we said by the calendar year for the actual expense. So I'm going to group by the expense date. Now notice when I do select expense date, since this is now a date time field, I want to have the option for how I want to actually do this. I could leave it just by distinct dates. That means every unique date that's in that attribute, it will create a separate grouping for that. But that's not what I want. I actually want to do it by calendar year. Note you can also set it by fiscal year. There are ways in the settings to determine what your actual fiscal year start period is if it doesn't align with the calendar, so you can do that as well. But for us, we align with the calendar, so a calendar year breakdown is exactly what I want. And then lastly, I want to look at the expenses themselves. And I want to just actually sum these. Sum will be the default there since it is numeric, but I can do other things like doing an average, min, max, things like that. So I have different options for how to actually process this. When I'm satisfied with this, I can select OK, and it'll generate that summarized table for me that I can now see now by department, by calendar year, what the total expenses were for that given department. And just to make this a little easier to read, I again probably want to format this column. So I can right click, come down to format. This time I'm going to do a currency format and select OK. So that'll be all of the changes for me to get a summarized view of those initial reports. Again, another thing I do like to point out here is that even though we summarize those original reports, we don't lose access to those. And that's one of the benefits of the load plan over on the left-hand side. The load plan will show you all of the different transformations that you've applied to your data set. So if I want to revert back to that original view, I just select the lower table and I'll have access and visibility to that original report. And if I want to see the transformed version of that, I can as well. So with that, that's a high-level overview of how we can leverage Monarch, which is a component of our Uplander platform, to do data cleansing, normalization, and aggregation. From the overall platform, we look mostly on the data extraction and data cleansing aspect of this, but just a reminder for you that the platform does give you full end-to-end access for any of the common tasks that you would work with. So pulling, extracting data from almost any location, building predictive models, doing data cleansing, ETL type operations, or just visualization or any combination thereof. You have the flexibility to do those all in a low-code fashion. And again, across different skill sets for different users have the flexibility to make use of this platform. So what's next? Well, for those of you that are currently using any Altair products and are aware of the units model that we have, you have access to all of these components of the DA solution now. So anything in the recommended platform to include Monarch, which we looked at today, you can give it a shot. Just download it, leverage your units to actually take a look at it. For our next session, we're going to cover is combining data. The last few sessions have been more about data extraction and then data cleansing and aggregation. But what if I have data coming from multiple locations and I need to combine them together into a single report? How do I go about doing that? So we're going to spend some time focusing on that for our next session. And of course, if you have additional questions and you want to reach out to us, always feel free to reach out to Jasmine. She is our main point of contact for our DA solution for Aero and Defense. Her email address is on the screen there. And with that, I'd like to thank you for joining today's session. Looking forward to seeing you for our next coffee break.